Richard Marles, welcome.
Good evening, Sarah. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Now, you face this election campaign with voters who've experienced a sharp decline in their living standards. How are you going to persuade them to look past that experience?
Well, one of the big issues, the big issue at this election is cost of living, and it's the issue that our government has been focused on for the entirety of our term in office, while really the oppositions, the Liberals, have barely thought about it. I mean, we have done now a series of income tax cuts, which for the average income earner will see them being $50 a week better off. The Liberals go to this election with a commitment for the first time for a major party in living memory of promising to increase income tax. We are putting forward the biggest investment in Medicare since its creation, which will see 9 out of 10 people be able to attend a GP and have it bulk billed, there being no gap fee. The Liberals are going to this election with the promise of $350 billion worth of cuts before you get to the $600 billion of cuts they'll need to fund their nuclear power scheme. And you can only achieve that amount of cuts by wholesale hacking into fundamental frontline services such as Medicare. And the fundamental issue here, Sarah, has been inflation. We inherited an inflation rate at 6.1% going north. Today it is 2.4% and getting better. That's because we've managed the budget prudently, delivered 2 budget surpluses, which the Liberals never did. So we're attacking the root cause whilst we're helping people along the way. And we get people are doing it tough, but the economy is starting to turn a corner, and we will stand by Australians the whole way.
Now, many analysts are saying this election will be won or lost in the state of Victoria, where you are. How vulnerable is the ALP in Victoria, and how much are you being hurt by the serious unpopularity of the state Labor government?
Well, look, we see that there will be challenges across the country, and we'll meet those challenges wherever they occur, including Victoria. But we'll make the case that I've just made. I mean, cost of living is an issue in Victoria as it is elsewhere. And our record in terms of dealing with the issue of cost of living and what we seek to do going forward, we're confident that message will resonate as much in Victoria as it will in any other part of the country. And that's what we will continue to talk about. But equally, I don't think Victorians are any fans of Peter Dutton. And when Victorians look at Peter Dutton, they look at a leader who has promised nothing other than cuts. And in the face of the challenges that people have had, a wholesale cut to frontline services such as Medicare is not going to win any support or approval in Victoria.
Let me just ask you this, though. One of their major policies is a cut to the petrol excise, which will have an immediate effect. It'll have an immediate effect in those outer suburban seats in Melbourne that are so vulnerable for your party. How are you going to combat that immediate impact felt by the voters in those parts of the electorates?
Well, firstly, they've spent the last 3 years, the leader of the opposition, the shadow treasurer, the shadow finance minister, talking about how cuts in the fuel excise is bad policy. I mean, literally, that's what they have done. Peter Dutton himself has said that this is a policy which can be gamed by the major oil giants. This is a temporary measure which they themselves have spent this term arguing won't work. It's not a policy that we're focused on because we're focused on enduring policies which deliver to all Australians.
Do you think that the opposition's, and briefly if you would, the opposition's plan to intervene in the gas market to bring down prices will have a particular appeal in Victoria where gas supplies are running out?
I think people will understand the hypocrisy of a Liberal Party which has done everything in the last 3 years to oppose the measures that Labor have put in place, which has already delivered 6 times the amount of gas to the East Coast gas market as what the Liberals were promising to produce last night. I mean, this is not a policy which is going to make the difference that we've already made. And the Liberals spent this term opposing it. I mean, they are shameless in what they are doing. It is a break glass policy because they do not want to talk about their nuclear power policy, which will cost $600 billion of taxpayers' money and will result in a wholesale cut to frontline services, and Australians can see that.
Richard Marles, thank you for joining us. When you come back, we'll obviously be talking about defence spending. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Now, Victorian Senator James Paterson is the Coalition's campaign spokesman. He's up for re-election this election. He's joining us now from Canberra. James Paterson, welcome to 7:30.
Good evening, Sarah.
Now, we're not hearing you talk about nuclear energy much. Why is that?
Well, Peter Dutton spoke about it in his budget reply address in the Parliament last night.
Only two. I was there and listening. Only two brief mentions.
I'm glad you were, Sarah, and it's very diligent. But we've been talking about our plan to introduce emissions-free, reliable, proven nuclear technology to Australia for the best part of this parliamentary term. It's an incredibly ambitious policy to launch from opposition, but Peter Dutton has taken this on because he believes it's in our nation's interest. We first revealed last year the 7 sites where we'll be rolling out these nuclear power plants. They'll be in energy-mature communities where there are retiring coal-fired power stations, where we can take advantage of the existing poles and wires infrastructure so we don't have to overbuild it all around the country. And then late last year we released our independent modelling, which demonstrated that our nuclear power plan compared to Labor's plan is 44% cheaper. And that's because we'll have a balanced mix of energy that will include renewables and gas and coal transitioning to emissions-free nuclear power rather than the government's reliance on renewables only, which will cost Australians more.
Now, just in terms of tactics, I talked a little bit there with Richard Marles about the vulnerability for Labor in those outer suburban seats, particularly in Melbourne. Now, have you, as a party, decided to give up essentially on the Teal seats and make those seats, outer suburban Melbourne, Sydney, your focus?
Not at all, Sarah. The Liberal Party is at its best when it aspires to represent all Australians, and the Liberal Party under Peter Dutton aspires to represent all Australians. We'll be fighting just as hard for Kooyong with Amelia Hamer as our candidate in inner city Melbourne, as we are for Hawke with Simone Cottam, our candidate there in outer suburban Melbourne. And we believe we can win both because Australians, regardless of whether they live in the inner city or the outer suburbs, have suffered under the last 3 years of Labor governments. The Prime Minister, when he was an opposition leader, promised that if Australians voted for a Labor government, that their lives would get better, that things would get cheaper. He even promised cheaper mortgages. But is there an Australian today who can say they are better off today than they were 3 years ago?
Now, at the same time, you just talked about your nuclear policy, but part of Peter Dutton's budget reply speech yesterday included an announcement that you would end the government's Rewiring the Nation programme, that is, to build transition lines for renewable energy. How is doing that going to appeal to the voters of Kooyong and other similar seats?
Well, what I find in communities like Kooyong, where I'm the Liberal Party's patron senator and I've spent a lot of time campaigning and talking to voters, is they have a mature understanding of what a modern energy system is like. They understand of the 20 largest economies in the world, 19 of them have nuclear energy or are moving towards nuclear energy in some form, and that Australia is one of the only advanced economies in the world that doesn't have it. They also understand that it's very difficult to sustainably reduce emissions without nuclear power because the risk that we take in this country, if we follow Labor's path, is it will deindustrialise our country by going down this renewables-only path. Part-time power for a full-time economy just doesn't work, and it's one of the reasons why 29,000 businesses have closed on this government's watch.
I feel like I just need to point out, for the sake of our audience, that the government does not have a renewables-only policy. They have a renewables policy which includes gas for peaking and firming. Anyway, let's move on to a very, if I may, to a very different subject. You're at liberty, of course, to come back to that if you will. But we saw a mention in Laura's package of the influence on politics of Donald Trump, which is profound, obviously, worldwide. The government is trying, including the Prime Minister this morning, to frame Peter Dutton as Trump-like. It was inferred this morning rather than stated directly, but we've seen it before. How do you defend Peter Dutton against that suggestion that he is in some way like Donald Trump?
Well, it's a desperate smear campaign from a desperate Prime Minister. He doesn't have a good agenda to sell for the Australian people. He certainly doesn't have a good record to talk about over the last 3 years because Australians' living standards have been smashed on his watch. And so all he has is personal attacks and smears on Peter Dutton as the alternative Prime Minister. Peter Dutton is a very different person and a very different political person than Donald Trump. He's a traditional centre-right Conservative. He's been in public life for 25 years. And he's a strong leader who will stand up for Australia. And he'll stand up for Australia to whoever he needs to stand up to, including our American friends. And Australians can have confidence that he will robustly defend our national interest against anyone who seeks to intervene in our country.
James Paterson, thank you very much indeed. Look forward to speaking to you often during the campaign.
Likewise. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.